Thank you. This is my first video update from Nicosia, Cyprus on this Thursday morning. Let's talk about some news, and let's start things off with a statement from Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, MBS, a statement that is attributed to Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, MBS, who said that he doesn't care to please the US anymore. And this follows a statement that he made a couple of weeks ago where he said that he doesn't care what Biden thinks of him. And as MBS is saying that he doesn't care what Biden thinks of him and he is not looking to please the US any longer, Russian warships were allowed to enter the port of Jeddah. This is the first time that Russian vessels have been allowed to enter the port of Jeddah in 10 years. According to a statement released by Russia's Western Military District, the two vessels made a working visit to the port of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. During their stay, the ships will replenish their fuel, drinking water, and food supplies, Russian military officials added. And as Russian vessels are being allowed to enter the port of Jeddah, Saudi officials are in Beijing meeting with Iranian officials to move along the diplomatic rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And while this is happening in Beijing, back in Saudi Arabia, MBS is making big moves to get Syria and the Assad government back into the Arab League. In Malaysia, the Prime Minister of Malaysia issued a statement the other day saying that the economies of Asia should move away from the IMF and create their own Asian IMF, and all of the trade and transactions and loans and funding should not take place in US dollars. They should take place in local currencies in Asia. Oh boy. Oh boy. What a stupid move the Biden White House, the European Union, and the collective West made when they placed sanctions on Russia, when they went after Russian assets, when they seized Russian foreign currency reserves, when they kicked Russia out of SWIFT, when they seized the yachts and the homes of Russian oligarchs. What a stupid move that was. When they placed a price cap on Russian oil and gas, boy, did they really, really, really mess up in a big, big way. The entire world is moving away from the US dollar and the Biden White House. And it really is the world moving away from the crazy, insane Biden White House, and by extension, the USD. I mean, the floodgates have been opened. Pandora's box has been opened. It's taken on a life of its own. The momentum now is quite overwhelming and quite shocking to see. I never thought in my lifetime I would see so many countries and so many world leaders openly talk about moving away from the US dollar and ditching the USD as reserve currency. But there you have it. Let's now talk about Bill Clinton and a statement he made during an interview with RTE. Bill Clinton, he said that he feels very, very bad about convincing Ukraine to give up their nuclear weapons in 1994. During the Budapest Memorandum negotiations, Bill Clinton said, "I feel personally responsible because I made them, Ukraine, agree to give up their nuclear weapons, and none of them believed that Russia would pull off this trick if Ukraine still had its weapons. So that's Bill Clinton pushing out another big lie about Ukraine, Russia, and the collective West, which is that Ukraine was forced to give up its nuclear weapons, and if it didn't give up its nuclear weapons, then Russia's invasion of Ukraine would have never happened. And so, because the collective West forced Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons, give Ukraine money and weapons now to fight a proxy war against Russia. Another lie. And this lie is being propagated by none other than Bill Clinton, and he knows he's lying. Bill Clinton knows he is lying. You are lying, Bill Clinton. You are lying, and you know it. Didn't Bill Clinton pay Paula Jones something like $850,000 in hush money to keep her quiet? Was there ever a criminal prosecution brought up against Bill Clinton in New York or anywhere else? I don't think so. Anyway, Bill Clinton is lying because Ukraine never had nuclear weapons. It never had nuclear weapons. The USSR had nuclear weapons. And when the USSR dissolved, everyone decided that those nuclear weapons should go to the successor state of the USSR, the state that was capable of managing and taking care of these nuclear weapons, the state that had the technical expertise, the engineers, the scientists, the know-how to safeguard these nuclear weapons. And that state was Russia. That is what everyone decided. That was the right decision to make. That was the best decision to make in the best interests of the world. And the nuclear weapons that were in Ukraine, by the way, they were deployed in Ukraine, but the only country that had the actual codes to make those weapons operational was Russia. The Russian officials in Moscow, in the Politburo, in what was the USSR central government, those were the officials that actually could make those weapons operational. They were deployed in Ukraine, they were deployed in Kazakhstan, they were deployed in Belarus as well. But it was Moscow that was managing those weapons, that had the operational codes, that could make those weapons operational, that had the codes. They were deployed in the USSR. And so during the Budapest Memorandum, all the countries came together, the US, the UK, Russia, they all came together and they said, in order to make sure that nothing goes wrong with these nuclear weapons, let's get them back to Russia, because Russia can manage these weapons. What would have been the alternative plan, Bill Clinton? Would it have been a good idea to allow Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Belarus, and Russia to have nuclear weapons? Would that have been the plan? Even though these countries did not have the know-how to manage these weapons? Would that have been a better plan? Instead of having one nuclear power, having four? That would have been a good idea? Of course not. And they knew it wasn't a good idea. Bill Clinton, he knew that at the time it was best if those nuclear weapons went to Russia. Not only from Ukraine, but in Kazakhstan and in Belarus and anywhere else that nuclear weapons were deployed in the Soviet Union. So the whole fiction about Ukraine having nuclear weapons is just that. It's fiction. Ukraine never, ever, 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 ever had nuclear weapons. The USSR had nuclear weapons. And the right decision was made to take those nuclear weapons that the USSR had and transfer them over to Russia. Period. End of story. Oh, Bill Clinton, Bill Clinton. And the way he lies, you know, he actually, he looks like, during this interview, he actually looks like he regrets forcing Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons. I mean, he actually believes his lie. I guess that's the trademark of a good liar. Believe your lie. So let's now shift gears. Well, we won't shift gears. Since we're talking about Ukraine, let's now stay on the subject of Ukraine. And let's talk about the president of Ukraine, Elensky, traveling to Poland on an awesome train, by the way. The Polish media is talking about Elensky's train. Boy, is it a cool train. I mean, this train is like gold toilet seats. I mean, the thing is like, talk about luxury. Man, I guess if you're worth 180 billion like Elensky, I guess you can afford to travel on the world's most luxurious train, because those photos of the train, wow, that is living a life of comfort and luxury. Anyway, Elensky took this luxurious train, his luxurious train, and he traveled to Poland. And he met with President Duda. And Elensky said during his statements after his meeting with Duda, and I quote, "In the future, there will be no borders between our peoples, political, economic, and what is very important, historical. But for this, you still need to win. To do this, you need to go side by side, a little more. No borders between Poland and Ukraine," as stated by Elensky. And Elensky's trip to Poland, the mainstream media won't report on it, but there were quite a few protests with Elensky's trip to Poland. Farmers are very upset because Ukraine is dumping wheat and agricultural products in Poland, and the farmers are not liking it. And in general, Polish citizens are not happy with the Ukrainization of Poland, a term coined by the Prime Minister of Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, the President or Prime Minister of Georgia, and he warned Georgia not to suffer Ukrainization. And now you have many Polish analysts and politicians and protesters and pundits warning Poland to avoid Ukrainization, an interesting term that seems to be gaining traction. So while on the surface it looks like Poland was very happy to host Elensky in Warsaw, I'm coming to believe that in Poland there is a growing percentage of society that is sick of Elensky, and they're sick of this conflict, and they're sick of the money and the weapons going to this conflict, and they do not want Poland to enter into a war with Russia, nor would they want Poland and Ukraine to merge, which is what Elensky is talking about. So that was the big statement from Elensky during his trip to Poland. And Elensky's spokesman gave an interview to the Financial Times yesterday, and he said that President Zelensky is ready to give up Crimea if and when the spring offensive reaches the border of Crimea. That is what a spokesman for the Zelensky government told the Financial Times. And let me read you the title of this post from the FT. Ukraine ready to talk to Russia on Crimea if counteroffensive succeeds. Senior official says Kiev does not exclude liberation of occupied peninsula by military means. So the main point to this Financial Times article and interview is that the Zelensky regime is now putting Crimea back on the negotiating table. Not that it was ever on the table if you look at it from the Russian perspective. From the Russian perspective, Crimea, Donbass is just a non-starter. But over the past year and a half, all we've heard from Elensky, the European Union, the Biden White House, is that Crimea will be captured by the Ukraine military. Crimea will be, as Zelensky has said many times, will be liberated by the Ukraine military. Zelensky officials are on record stating that by the summer of 2023, they will be swimming or fishing or something like that in Crimea. That's what they've been saying for the past year and a half. And now we have an Zelensky government spokesman saying, well, once the spring counteroffensive is successful and it reaches the borders of Crimea, we could negotiate with Russia, and maybe we'd be willing to concede that Crimea is Russian. That's what this government spokesman is saying. And I just can't help but think that we've now come full circle to the Minsk agreement. We've come full circle to the Minsk agreement, pretty much. The only thing that's missing is a statement from the Elensky government, and I'm sure it's going to come in the next weeks or months, which is that they're willing to negotiate on Donbass as well. Once the spring counteroffensive or the summer counteroffensive or whatever offensive they're going to launch, once this happens and we do this and that, X, Y, and Z, we're willing to talk about Donbass. That's going to be a statement that we're going to hear in 2 or 3 months. Now we're willing to talk about Crimea, but only once we reach the border. If we reach the border, I think the exact quote of the spokesman was, "If we reach the border." One sec. Let me make sure I get his quote right. If we manage to achieve our strategic goals on the battlefield, and when we find ourselves on the administrative border with Crimea, we are ready to open a diplomatic page for discussion. But this does not mean that we exclude the option of liberating Crimea by military means. Okay, he has to throw that caveat in there. Andrei Sibija, deputy head of the president's office. He's the one that gave the interview to the Financial Times. So if we manage to achieve our strategic goals on the battlefield. A year plus of war so that the collective West and the Zelensky regime can essentially get back to the Minsk agreement. We're just missing a statement about Donbass. Once they make a statement about Donbass, we have the Minsk agreement again. That's it. Unbelievable. Sad and tragic as well. Very sad and very tragic that they've had to go through all of this war and conflict and the destruction of Ukraine so that they can now say that they're willing to negotiate on Crimea. And the big if is them reaching the borders of Crimea. We do have an article from Reuters, which is saying that the Ukraine military has put together a force of 40,000. I believe the word that Reuters uses is 40,000 storm brigade troops for the big counteroffensive. More than a year into Russia's full-scale invasion, Alex, with a K, Alex, a translator with no prior military experience, was advancing through forest with rifle raised, training to ambush enemy forces in one of Ukraine's newest military units. Border of Steel is one of the 8 new storm brigades, totaling 40,000 soldiers that Ukraine wants to use during a counteroffensive against Russian occupiers in coming weeks or months. I want the war to be over as soon as possible, and I hope the strike brigade will make it happen a lot faster, Alex told Reuters at a training facility in a secret location in Ukraine. You know, I have to say that the opening paragraph of a former translator with no prior military experience, Alex, one of these 40,000 storm troop brigade soldiers, I have to say, doesn't make it seem like these 40,000 troops are the elite of the Ukraine military. It doesn't instill a lot of confidence in this force that is going to be launched against the Russian military and layers of Russian defenses and fortifications. A former translator with no prior military experience walking through the forest with his gun pointed upwards. That doesn't sound very, very promising for this Ukraine offensive, but we'll see. Maybe NATO is going to be intertwined with these 40,000 troops. Maybe these 40,000 troops will have a good percentage of NATO soldiers, maybe Polish soldiers. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? But Elensky, he also said during his trip to Poland, he also said that if it becomes even hotter in Bakhmut, or there is a danger that we may lose personnel, the necessary decisions will be made. Exactly what is the number of personnel that needs to be lost so that the Zelensky regime can finally pull out its troops from Bakhmut? I mean, what's that number, Elensky? 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000? Prigozhin, he said in a statement, the Wagner chief, he said in a statement that the Russian military actually was thinking of closing the pincer, of closing the cauldron completely, but they decided to not close it completely for the purpose of allowing Elensky to throw Ukraine military into Bakhmut and to be annihilated. So what exactly is the number, Elensky, that Ukraine losses need to reach so that you can finally give up on Bakhmut? What is that number? Please tell us. So Elensky was in Poland. Macron went to China. Van der Crazy is on her way to Beijing as well. She may actually be there right now. And what do we get from Macron as he's meeting with Chinese officials? A warning. He's warning China and any country that if they dare to help Russia, they will be considered an accomplice to this war. And Macron said that with any crime, you have a victim, and that victim is Ukraine, and that is who the collective West is helping. You have the criminal, which according to Macron is Russia, and you have accomplices. And Russia told the Chinese, don't you dare be accomplices to this crime, or else you will feel the wrath of little Napoleon. That is what he told Xi Jinping. Quite a statement from Macron. What was China's response to all of this? The Chinese foreign minister said that we welcome all tourists, as Macron landed in China. We welcome all tourists to China. Oh boy. Stoltenberg also warned China, by the way, the NATO chief. He warned China as well. Don't you dare help Russia. Ursula von der Crazy said that she's going to Beijing to convince China to stop its support of Russia. Stoltenberg also warned Belarus, by the way, as well. He's told Belarus that if you continue to side with Putin, you're going to face repercussions from NATO. A lot of warnings being thrown out there. I wonder if the EU and Van der Crazy and Macron, I wonder if they can back up all of their tough talk and their warnings to China and to Belarus. Belarus, by the way, has nuclear weapons deployed to Belarus. Tactical nuclear weapons are deployed in Belarus. They haven't been transferred, but they have been deployed. Lukashenko is also in Moscow meeting with Putin. A lot of meetings taking place, a lot of pieces being moved. Elensky in Poland, Macron in Beijing, Van der Crazy in Beijing, Lukashenko in Moscow. A lot of meetings. Something is happening. Something is being prepared. And I think we're seeing the final diplomatic preparation taking place. I wouldn't be surprised if Macron and Van der Crazy are in Beijing and they're not only warning China, but they're also telling China that they're going to be launching something in Ukraine. I don't know, just a hunch. They're going to be launching something in Ukraine, and if China does not pull its support for Russia, well, then I'm sure they're going to tell Beijing that China's next. Something like that. Something like that appears to be going on. What else? What else do we have to talk about? Since we're on the subject of the European Union, Politico put out a report yesterday saying that the EU's ammo plan, you remember their ammunition slush fund, it's not going so well, this slush fund plan that was concocted by Jungle Joseph Borrell. This was the 2 billion euro slush fund where 1 billion euros was going to go to EU member states in order to bribe them into giving up their ammunition and giving it over to Ukraine. That was the first 1 billion of this slush fund, and the other 1 billion of the slush fund is going towards the procurement of ammunition production. And the problem that the EU is facing is that they don't know who to give this 1 billion euros to. They're not sure what companies, what military producers are going to get a piece of this 1 billion euros so that they can start production of ammunition for Ukraine. And the big problem that the EU is facing is that France, Greece, and Cyprus, they are insisting that only EU companies should be considered as producers of this ammunition and as companies that should have access to this 1 billion euros. Other EU member states are actually saying that, you know what, we should look outside the European Union and outside EU companies and perhaps give this money over to Turkey. Now you see the problem. There are some EU members who are saying, let's contract with Turkish military producers and give them 1 billion so they can create the ammunition. France, Cyprus, and Greece are saying no. No, we don't want the 1 billion going to Turkish military ammunition producers. And so they've hit a wall. They've hit a wall and they don't know how to sort it out. It's not so easy to produce the ammunition, is it? Is this how wars of attrition are fought? Is this how winning is done? The European Union is trying to find companies to produce the 155 millimeter ammunition, and they just can't figure it out. Should we go with an EU company? Should we go outside of the EU? But if we go with a company outside of the EU, other member nations are like, no, I don't want to give them the money. And I'm sure there's other EU nations that are saying, give the money to us. We'll produce the ammunition. Yeah, right. Just give us the 1 billion. We'll produce the ammunition. Don't worry about it. Oh boy. EU ambassadors who met on Wednesday weren't able to make significant progress. Several diplomats with knowledge of the negotiations told Politico. They did manage to finalize the text of the agreement to collect ammunition donations, however, which should be published next week. Well, it's good to see that they did finalize the text. That's good to know. Very good to know. Let's do a clown world, and now let's do a couple of clown worlds. And the first clown world is Pompeo's visit to Kiev. The prospective, the potential presidential candidate for the Republican Party, Mike Pompeo, the former Trump Secretary of State and the former CIA head, was in Kiev to pay homage to Elensky. This is before Elensky went to Poland. Isn't that interesting that while Trump is in New York being brought up on 34 charges of nothing, 34 charges of nothing, you have Pompeo in Kiev meeting with Zelensky, and many people are saying that this is Pompeo's first real big signal that he is going to be running for president in 2024. Meeting with Zelensky is the first real indication that Pompeo wants to become president. So it was a very pathetic display to see Mike Pompeo groveling at the feet of Elensky. But yeah, Pompeo knows that if he does want to run for president, then in order to please the neocons and the warmongers and the deep states, the globalists and the neoliberals, he has to go to Kiev and bow down to the avatar of globalist neoliberalism, and that is Elensky. And then we had the video that came out the other day from the meeting between Robert Habeck and Elensky. And once again, this is before Elensky traveled to Poland to meet with Duda, the German finance, economic, green, energy / everything minister. He went to Kiev and he met with Zelensky. And the video that came out, I'm going to play it for you. Boy, oh boy, is it sad. I mean, sad and pathetic to watch a grown man, Robert Habeck, a man who has reached the top level, one of the top levels of the German government, traveling to Kiev and groveling, apologizing at the feet of one-time comedian, clown, President Elensky. It is so sad to see. Robert Habeck apologized to Elensky because Germany was just not quick enough to get the weapons to Ukraine, and it didn't give enough weapons and money to Ukraine. And for this, Robert Habeck felt it was important for himself and for Germany to apologize to Elensky and Ukraine. Here's the video.
Maybe you remember we met 2021.
Yes, of course.
And
Another life.
it was another life, yes, actually. But you explained to me, also the other members of the cabinet, that the threat of war was real, and that time we started a debate in Germany that we should support Ukraine also with weapons. Germany was not able or willing to do that time. We changed our position, but it took too long and it was too late. I know that. I think not all of the German politicians would say the same, but I feel deeply ashamed that it's all too late. And part of my job was in the last year to help delivering weapons as fast and as many as we could, and this is an ongoing promise. So
that was Robert Habeck apologizing to Elensky on behalf of the German state and the German people for not getting enough weapons to the Elensky regime. So sad to see. The only thing that was missing was Robert Habeck on his knees, begging Elensky for forgiveness. Please, please, Elensky, please, pretty please, will you forgive us? Will you forgive Germany? Will you forgive the German people? Because we were not quick enough to get you the weapons that you needed, and we didn't get all the weapons that you asked for to you. Will you forgive us? Please, Zelensky. Please, 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 Zelensky, forgive us. Habeck, get up off your knees. You look pathetic. Pathetic. Up off your knees. Be a man. Be a man. I will forgive you. I will forgive you, Habeck. I will forgive Germany, and I will forgive the German people. Go back to Berlin. Tell them that you have received Elensky's forgiveness. But Mr. Habeck, in order to receive this forgiveness from Elensky, you must give me 5 billion euros. Okay? Now, be gone. Back to Germany. Pathetic. Pathetic and sad. Oh, how far Germany has fallen. How far it has fallen. Let's do a final clown world, and we're going to wrap this video up. I'm here in Nicosia at the Tree of Life, as I call it. The beautiful tree in Nicosia, downtown, old town Nicosia. And the final clown world is another prank from Vauban and Lexus. This time they got François Hollande, the former president of France, who was the president at the time of the Minsk agreement and the Minsk negotiations, along with Merkel and Poroshenko and Putin. And Vauban and Lexus pretended to be none other than Poroshenko. And they called up François Hollande, and they got Hollande to admit that the Minsk agreements were indeed a sham, as Merkel stated in multiple interviews. Hollande said that the Minsk agreements were nothing more than a way for the collective West to buy time for Ukraine so that Ukraine can build a powerful military. And Hollande was very proud of the fact that the collective West, he said himself, Merkel, he even said you as well, Poroshenko, that they duped and conned President Putin. He was very proud of that. And that is the latest prank call from Vauban and Lexus, and they always use Poroshenko. Poroshenko is their go-to guy when they make these prank calls. And you would think that François Hollande, who was at the negotiating table in Minsk with Poroshenko there, I'm sure he's held hundreds of phone calls with Poroshenko. You would think that by now, François Hollande would know what Poroshenko sounds like, but he doesn't. And he fell for it. And he basically admitted what Merkel has said and what Poroshenko has said and what all the collective West officials are now saying, which is that the Minsk agreements were a complete sham, a complete farce. And the only reason that the collective West negotiated the Minsk agreements was so that they could buy time for Ukraine to arm itself and to build a powerful NATO military, which would eventually be used as a proxy to fight the Russians, which would, in the minds of the collective West, lead to a regime change in Russia, along with economic sanctions against Russia. How has that all turned out for the collective West? And I go back to the USD, the petrodollar, the reserve currency. How has it all turned out? Not a very good plan. They should have just honored the Minsk agreements. So simple. That's the video, everybody. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Telegram, and Rockfin as well. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code Good Day. And Instagram, Duran shop. Follow us on Instagram and take part in a Duran shop giveaway. Take care.